To me, it was delightful. Honest to goodness village. There were brick walks that the Village Improvement Society built. Then they had oil lamps on the streets. Nearly everybody in town had half to 1 acre of ground. It was just a delightful atmosphere. I still can't get over it. I still say, I'm going to the village. Everyone in Falls Church used to have a front porch. I would love to just sit on my front porch watching the world go by, or just being still.
Hi, Ed.
Hi, Mark. How you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you again. Should we have a seat here?
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you meeting with me. You're clearly coming from church, and I'm coming from home. It's a Sunday afternoon in December, and we're sitting at Ed Henderson's front porch, actually on the stoop of his bungalow, and it's on Maple Street. And it's a nice December afternoon. We're pretty fortunate, or we probably couldn't be out here.
Yeah.
We're sitting on the stoop here where I've got a picture that shows Ed with his family. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
This was in 1957, and in this picture we have, this is my grandfather, and I'm sitting on his knee. This is his mother, my great-grandmother, and above us is my sister Ellen, and in between, right above me, is my cousin Robin Cabness, who is Booker T. Washington's granddaughter, great-granddaughter, should I say. Yeah. And then next to her is my sister Dina, who lives a couple of miles from here in Falls Church. And here's my brother Jay. Snaggletooth, in this picture.
Now, your grandfather built this house?
Yes. In 1910, when he got married to my grandmother, they lived with his grandmother over at 21 South Washington from 1910 until 1913 when they moved in here. He built this house in 1913. He bought the land from his grandmother, my great-great-grandmother, and built this house on it. And right now, it's just 1/4 acre. But when he bought it, it was 1.5 acres. It was never wider than this, but it went back across Lee Highway and to, I guess it was to the length that included 1.5 acres. Mm-hmm. Now in 1920, this here, Maple Avenue, was the main road at the time. This was Old Fairfax Courthouse Road, or right now, let's see, there was a east and west Fairfax Street. But, and this was always the front of the house. But when they built Lee Highway, the house was closer to Lee Highway, and this was a long front yard. Mm-hmm. I guess at one time it was a long backyard too. But, and we had been saying that the house was moved twice, but it was never moved when they put in Lee Highway. It just cut off where the barn was with the cows and the chickens. Mm-hmm. And eventually they they sold that over there on the other side of Lee Highway. And then in 1950, he moved the house towards Maple so that he could build the stores where Fox Music is. And there were big plans that included 8 stores. I see that in an old newspaper in a scrapbook. But apparently, I think plans fell through and he just built the stores that are in the back here, which included Fox Music.
So originally it was a much more gracious kind of front yard here, whereas you were sitting back way from the you saw people
Yeah.
coming from much further away, and it's a very nice porch, very well protected, and a nice introduction to the house, which is, I think, an aspect of the bungalow style that generally, as opposed to walking right into the front door into the living room, you've got this, intermediate space, which
Right.
I think it's appropriate they were sitting on the stoop here. I think that's a very important part of the bungalow style as well. What sort of meetings or from your understanding of it? I know a great deal of civil rights activities were probably planned here or discussed here, and I recently became aware of the story of the whole Tinner Hill and the problems that led to the NAACP rural chapter, and what I particularly like about that story is that it sounds as if they were just real people that were reacting to a very important situation, and then went back to leading regular lives. And that's what's
Well-
very appealing to me about that. And I'm sure that a lot of those regular people got together here and were kind of forced into some rather spectacular work.
Well, if you read the history of the Fairfax County branch of the NAACP, you'll read that even though it was my grandfather who called together the Council of Nine, which made up the Colored Citizens Protective League in 1915, that meeting was held at Joseph Tinner's house. However, many subsequent meetings were here at this house, including like into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when, especially in the 40s and 50s, when there were meetings between other civil rights people throughout the state who were getting together and trying to desegregate the schools. Now, in the late 40s, my grandfather put together a study which showed the discrepancy between the amount of money paid to black teachers and allocated for black schools throughout Fairfax County. As you probably know, there was no secondary school or high school for blacks in Fairfax County.
Right.
And because of that, blacks had to go to either Manassas, which is Prince William County, or if they wanted to take an academic track, that was an industrial school. If they wanted to take an academic track, they had to
Nevermind had to go up to Arlington, I believe.
no, not even in Arlington.
Really?
They had to go all the way to
DC. Oh, you're right. You're absolutely right.
That's right. And, even though the schools were desegregated in the 50s, supposedly, there was no integration of schools until the early to mid 60s here in Northern Virginia. And so a lot of those meetings regarding that were held here. And I'm sure there's a number of other ones which I have no idea about,
Right.
which were also held here.
Well, currently, how do you use the porch now? I mean, is it still a meeting place, or is it more
Well,
sitting at the end of the day and staying cool place?
Well, I have to admit that for the most part, it's a staying cool place, particularly in the spring and the fall. Sometimes in the summer, even though it gets pretty hot around here in the summertime. But I have to also say that I've entertained people on the porch, and we have also had Tinner Hill meetings right here on the porch. And last Tinner Hill Street Festival, we had a blues musician actually give a blues harmonica workshop here on the porch. And the Tinner Hill Festival before that, we had Charles Drew's sister, Nora Gregory, who, even though we had a lot of exhibits set up in the house, for Tinner Hill documents and memorabilia, And we had, she wanted to come out and sit and talk and mingle with people, and then we had her to actually come out in the yard and sit down and do an interview. And we've also used, well, not the porch, but maybe we will at some time in the future, but we've had concerts here inside of the house, but we've all often, at least a couple of times, talked about the idea of having concert fundraisers with the musicians being on the porch and the people being in the yard.
Well, I look forward to that. That'd be nice.
That would be, I think so.
Yeah. Well, how has the neighborhood changed since you've been? I mean, I imagine you have memories from going way back.
Oh, well, you know, this house is basically, well, not basically, but definitely in a commercially zoned area now. At one time, all of this was basically farmland. And so it's gone through drastic changes, and at times it's been a struggle to try to hold on to the property itself, even though it's dwindled from 1.5 acres to 1/4 of an acre now. But it's protected under the historical registry, and further changes are likely to come. When they're talking about mixed use on the other side of the street, which will include commercial as well as residential. And on the other 3 sides, we have all businesses. But I'd have to say that during the day and up through rush hour, it's pretty busy. But after that, it's as peaceful as any residential community.
Great. Okay. Well, it is a nice day. I'm glad we had such a nice day to sit out here, and I really appreciate you letting me come by and talking to you about the house. It's
Thanks for coming.
A lot of really important and really great stuff has happened here, and I'm sure you're glad it's still in your family.
Yeah, and I hope to see you at some of the future events that will be here.
Okay, it's a deal.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Take care.
Nearly every street in Falls Church was arched over with trees. You walked under a bower. That's what made Falls Church so attractive.
Well, I'm standing here with Barbara Cram from Greenscape, and we're looking at the specimen American sycamore tree in the city of Falls Church at Thomas Jefferson Elementary School in the playground next to Trips Run. Welcome, Barbara.
Welcome, Dave.
What do you think about this tree?
It's a grand tree. I am fond of the exfoliation on the bark, and as we look up the tree, we'll see the silver white, and as we come down, we'll see where the bark is still coming off the base, and then we see the flare, which is extremely beautiful. Looks carved.
Yeah, it does look like some kind of a sculpture, doesn't it?
Yes, yes it does.
Beautiful. That's kind of a wild-looking tree, isn't it?
Yeah, the branching on this tree is very asymmetrical and sort of bent and long, and as you know, they get as wide as they do tall often, and that's what adds to the interest, I think, on the branching. It's very thickly branched, but yet the main branches are contorted.
I think that's a great word.
Yeah.
It does look contorted. It looks like something almost like in a horror movie.
Yes, yes, painted black it would fit.
Right, right. Well, the shadows on this, when the light is reflecting off
Yeah.
this.
I bet you it glows in the moonlight.
It does.
Yes.
It does. I've been out here during the full moon. It's quite striking. And another time is during the snow.
Right.
In a bright snow, it's almost blinding, this tree.
And you don't see the bark because the leaves are so large when it's in full leaf in the spring and summer. The fall they turn, that golden yellow and then brown and drop. So we're at the dropped stage here, so we get a chance to see the beautiful bark.
The leaves are huge.
Yes, size of small dessert plates.
Oh, really? Sounds tasty. A lot of people confuse this for some reason with a maple because of the shape of the leaves.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Maples, I think, have much more, they're deeply lobed.
Right.
And these are not quite so. Just see if I could find
These are
one
so
here.
much bigger here.
Yeah, here's one.
Yeah. These are so much bigger, but the shape somehow
Yes.
looks like, now that's a brown leaf. That's
Yes, this is your basic
already
brown.
after it's discolored. And
I'm not seeing
fall.
any yellow ones, but you'll see here, whereas the maple has much finer
Right.
leaf, it's not as coarse.
But it gives almost that five-finger look.
Yeah, but as you know, the maple has much more, it's more deeply lobed and a little more feathery in appearance, as this one is very simple.
Now these have the seed pods are these or fruit, I guess you'd call it, or the are like in the sweet gum. They're real like a prickly ball of, it's almost sticky that hangs down, and a lot of people don't like that in their yard because they hate to rake them up. But I think they're great.
Yeah, we use them for a lot of decoration.
Oh, you do at
Yeah,
Greenscape?
yeah, we use them on topiaries. We make balls out of them and we paint them gold and hang them on our little natural trees along with some acorns and things.
So the people who have sycamores and don't like those, they can sell them to Greenscape?
That's right.
Good idea. I think we're gonna have a lot of more people.
We used to
planting
pay the
sycamore.
children a penny a ball, and it really was fun.
Really, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I would have brought you some. That's great. Well, now there's a lot of lore about the sycamore, like about the Native Americans and the colonists. Do you know any of those? Or?
Well, mostly the colonists would look for these trees, obviously, because they tended to be near water sources, and that was important, obviously,
so
to
if they're
have
walking
water.
through the woods and they
Yeah.
needed water, they say,
Right, and
"Get me
often
to the sycamore tree."
Right, and often because the trees get large, they can grow with a hollow trunk where the pith, the center is gone, and you just have the phlegm and the xylem on the side. They would be so large that you could actually, be inside of that tree. With a couple could be inside of that tree
Kind of
and
like
have
Swiss
a tree
Fam-
house.
like Swiss Family Robinson?
Exactly.
That's great.
Exactly.
Huh. So a lot of trees, if they get hollow, we got to take them down. But a sycamore then isn't that big
Right.
a deal.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, that's great. Well, there's so many aspects of this that's interesting. I think it's one of the most interesting trees I've seen.
It's fun to look at.
Yeah. Yeah, let's look at the flare of that tree at the bottom. That is unique. They don't call those knees, do they? I don't know what they call them.
Knees and knobs.
Knees-
I guess
knees
that's where
and
knobby
knobs.
knees came from.
Yeah, knees and knobs. Okay. Well, the way they come out like that, it's I kind of like want to sit on it. It just makes me kind of want to go over and sit on it, and even though it's at an angle or lay back against it.
Exactly.
I notice during playtime, kids are always around this, leaning on it, talking to each other. They have this whole field, but they gravitate to this one tree.
It's sort of a friendly reaching out look.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now the stream is right next to it, Trips Run, and that's all been cemented.
It looks like they clear cut when they put this in. It used to be a floodplain, as I understand, and when they clear cut it and ran sewer over here on the right, this tree survived it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. We figure this to be about 100 plus or minus in years. If you had an oak this size, it would be about 300 plus or
Right.
minus in years.
So it's a fast-growing tree.
faster growing tree, right?
That's good. Well, this is an exciting tree to see. Now we have actually one tree that's bigger, but it's outside the city. It's on city property that is leased to the UVA,
Oh, really?
and it's actually bigger than this, but it's not technically in the city. So this is our one. I noticed behind you. There's two others right behind you. Two other big sycamores. And, the twin sisters, I guess we'll
Oh,
call them.
yes. Now, there's where you can appreciate the white
Isn't that gorgeous?
bark at the top. It really is beautiful.
There's another one, a baby, down to the right. You want to go over and see
Sure.
what a baby sycamore looks like?
Sure.
Let's go on over. Well, Barbara, we're at a baby tree. We're only about 50 yards away from the big mama tree. What do you see different about a baby than you see about the mama?
Well, I think the branching is not quite as pronounced. It seems more symmetrical. The bark is not as white. It hasn't exfoliated as much, and the leaves are still on.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. And the trunk is just more cylindrical than the senior tree over there. I don't see the flare. I guess that's something you get as you get older.
I'm waiting for me. It's great. Right, it isn't very wide right now
No,
at
no.
all. It still has a wild look. That's an interesting tree in that there was a nursery in town that went out of business, and they were going to throw away all their sycamore trees because they couldn't sell them fast enough. So he gave them to us, and we planted a bunch of them along Trips Run, and all of them survived. And I think we're going to have in 100 years
Nice
some very
stand.
nice sycamores here. This will be a grove of sycamores.
That'll be great.
Great.
You can
Nice
really
tree.
appreciate the white
Yep.
in this other tree.
Yeah,
from
because
here,
you don't
too.
see the white here
No.
at all. I guess the whiteness comes with age. I
Yes.
guess. Great. Beautiful tree.
Uncle George used to take me down to Mankin's Notions and Dry Goods, a corner store at Broad in Washington, where the office building is now. She always had candy, which was something we couldn't have at home. It was a great treat for me to go to Mrs. Mankin's store and have those marvelous penny candies. Uncle George used to carry me down to the store and get them for me. Mother didn't approve, but he did it just the same. I enjoyed it.
So how long have you been located here?
20 years, the 1st of April.
Wow. Have you seen many changes here?
Actually, this place never changes. It's always 3 a.m. Wednesday morning.
And the name Hole in the Wall, how did you come up with that name?
The store sort of named itself, but we remembered there's a pub in London, Hole in the Wall, and then Jesse James took the name from that based on the big hole in the mountain there in Montana where the Jesse James gang. So it just sort of, this place is like that. It's just a little hole in the wall.
And do you you like being in the city of Falls Church?
Yes, I do. Falls Church is great. It's a quaint town, and yet it's the city as well. You've got everything here in this town.
And I mean, we can see you have comic books and books. Can you tell us something about your products?
We've got just about every comic book here in existence with a back stock of about 250,000. Because we've been doing this for about 16 years in the comics, we've been in business 20 years, but comics for 16, we do have that many comic books. So you name a title, I've probably got it.
And are they all new or old or
Yes.
both?
Yes.
And collectibles?
Yes.
And do you have people that subscribe or?
Yes, we do. We have approximately this month, I think about 3,400 different titles that we're actually giving to the customers this month.
And over the years, have you seen a change in the comics or what have?
Most definitely. The business itself, there was a sort of a crash in the market in '93. I think when people realized they can't really rely on the comic book as a collectible. You have to buy comics the same way you buy books because you like them, because you want to read them. And it's great if you find out later that the book that you really wanted to read is worth $50 or $100 or $500. It's great. That should be, though, the second reason, this sort of a secondary reason to buy them. Buy them because you want to read them.
Okay, back when I bought comic books, it was all Spider-Man and X-Men and that
The
kind.
Hulk.
And how are they? What kind of is that still the same?
Oh, those guys are still going strong. In fact, still in the top 10 every month, there's a guide called Wizard. The X titles, the X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men, Wolverine, they are still in the top 10 almost every month. It'll fluctuate if DC's doing a special that month where they're doing a saga. It will fluctuate a bit, but for the most part, it's the X titles. They're still the #1 selling comic.
I have to admit that my 8-year-old and 6-year-old, their favorite are the Spider-Man and the Superman and the old favorites. What are some of the new comic names?
Oh, let's see. Battle Chasers, Danger Girl, Planetary, Image, Spawn. He's a new character, really new, I say. In the comic world, it's new. He's about 8 years old, whereas Superman is 60 years old. Or is it 65 now? I lose track of time. Oh, and we just had the wedding of Popeye and Olive Oyl. You realize we've been waiting for 60 years for that? So, they're still going strong. Still going strong. And Superman as well. Even though he died, he's back. And he's still going strong.
That's great.
And so is the Batman.
Your clientele, is it mostly children, or what's the age range?
I'll tell you now, with the Pokemon craze, we're getting kids that are 6, 4, doing the comics and, of course, asking for the cards. And actually up to kids that are about 61. So everybody's buying comics.
What's your favorite comic?
I tend to like Arthurian things when people do. For instance, I was just reading The Legend of Camelot, which is just King Arthur redone. Yet another story following the legend.
Now, I see that you have
Oh, wait a second, and one other that I forgot that I'm loving. The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, written by Alan Moore. It brings in Alan Quatermain from H. Rider Haggard's books. It brings in Bram Stoker's Dracula. It brings in some Victorian literature, and he sort of puts it all together in comic book form. It is excellent, excellent. That's my favorite comic book for the year, The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Now, I'm noticing that you have a lot more here than just comic books. It seems like you have shelves of books. Can you tell me what kind of books?
We sell everything really except romance. We specialize in science fiction and fantasy, in mysteries, in children's literature, history, and classic and modern lit. We have it in paperback form, in hardback form. We also have historical fiction, horror, big books, books on airplanes, boats, trains, planes, everything that goes. We have art books. We have natural history. We have just a little bit of everything and a lot of some things.
Now, getting back to your clientele and this being comic books, can you tell me some of the most interesting maybe people or things that have happened here over the years?
We did have an odd customer who would come in with a helmet, and he had the helmet lined in aluminum foil, and would explain that was so that the aliens couldn't contact him again. I would say he's probably quite an odd bird. He's it. He's the one that comes to mind when you talk about odd things, odd occurrences.
That sounds great. You sure that wasn't Dave Eckerd?
Could have been. Could very well have been. In fact, the fellow looked like Dave a bit.
I loved going to the village. Everybody knew everybody. I would say, "Hello, Mrs. Brown," or "Hello, Mr. Hawkshurst," and they would all know me and my kin.
Well, we're here today with one of the more familiar faces in Falls Church, Carol Jackson, who has involved herself with so many different circles of interest in Falls Church. Just had to ask her to be on the show and show Falls Church a truly familiar face. Welcome, Carol.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate the opportunity.
Sure. We're here at one of the most familiar places in town, to the Falls Church, after which
the community of Falls Church, the city of Falls Church is named. Do you know why it's called the Falls Church?
I know, yes, I do know the story. This location was part of what they called the Greater Truro Parish back in the colonial days. This particular location was established in the 1730s, and all of the churches that made up the Truro Parish were not described in any way outside of the written communication other than Truro Parish, but the local inhabitants would develop their own little familiar place names. And our church was on the road to the falls. It was the tobacco rolling road that the plantation or farmers used to get to the river to ship their goods out for sale. So it was the road to the Falls Church, and then it just became the Falls Church.
Yeah, laziness occurred, and they shortened it. Yeah. And I guess this road right out here, East Fairfax Street?
That's what my historian friends tell me, yes.
Oh, okay. It's the old rolling road?
Yes.
That's great.
Yeah, they said the first structure was a wooden structure that did face Fairfax Street, so they're pretty sure that was, the way that the commerce traffic went.
Why are we here today? What's your connection with the Falls Church?
I'm on staff here. I've been a member since the early 90s, and I started working
1990s
here.
we're talking
yes,
about.
Yes,
right.
Thank you. I turned 50 this year, but not 150, so. Yeah, I've attended here as a parish member since the early 1990s, and I've been on staff since 97, so I'm officially, they call me the Connections Coordinator at the church. We're a very large parish. Now this room is our historic sanctuary, so it doesn't capture the numbers of people that we have attending the church. We have almost 2,000 families who go here, and they need somebody just to keep track of people and try to plug them in as they want to become active members of the church. So it's my pleasure to have that job.
Oh, it sounds great. And this room is so incredible. I look around and I see commemoratives to George Washington, Silas Tripp. You hear of Tripp's Run. We see names Mary Riley Stiles in here, like from the library on these plaques, and everywhere around here we see.
Yeah, Bailey's is one that most people don't know. Bailey's Crossroads was named after the family that was the partners in Barnum and Bailey Circus, and we have the Bailey patriarch buried in our graveyard. So we have some wonderful information in our archives about the history of the church, and we love to have the community drop by and inquire about things. So
that's great. You're Henry Fairfax. Going back to the Baileys, George Bailey's here. If you ever watch It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey. There's actually a tombstone that says George Bailey out there.
That's
that was humorous.
That's right.
And a lot of the names you see on streets, you see the people buried here, the famous names. So this is exciting.
It's definitely a local landmark. It's one of the few structures in town that's on the National Register of Historic Places and designated as a National Historic Landmark. So we have that distinction.
Well, we're really thankful for the church, the parish, to have preserved it. So that's, the landmark.
The good news is we have good people on the inside of the building, too.
Yeah, that's good.
We're a church who's grateful to be part of this community, and hopefully we give back.
Yeah. Well, you're familiar here, but you've been familiar in many other sections of Falls Church. I mean, I'll start you on a couple, but you'll have to tell me some, because I'm unfamiliar with many of the things that you've done. Most recently, I've seen you on the Housing Corporation. You've been leading some workshops I've been going to, and tell me a little bit about your work there.
Well, the Housing Corporation is an honor for me to serve on the corporation board. That sort of came out of my connection with the winter homeless shelter that was established here about 5 years ago. And I guess probably the key to one of my my character traits is that I love to just strike while the iron is hot and sort of take advantage of what's going on around me to join my interest in involving myself with other people. And so my history of volunteerism here in the city, I guess, would just be, following one thread after another. And the homeless shelter was being organized by a group of people who came from most of the churches here in the city. And we needed to have a cadre of people who would actually establish the site and keep it going. And we have stayed together as a very grassroots committee that basically just works with citizens to run and support the shelter in the variety of ways that we need financial and volunteer support. So I guess I'd done that a couple of years, and people on the Housing Corporation had heard my name as an applicant. We applied to the Housing Corporation to receive some financial support for the shelter. Mm-hmm. So they were familiar with my name and what I was saying about the shelter, and invited me to think about joining the board. And I really consider that probably one of my favorite associations for all time. I strongly believe in the mission of the Housing Corporation, which is to provide affordable housing to people who would not be able to be part of this community without that effort. Yeah. And it's one of my personal, I think, missions for the future is to help Falls Church stay a diverse, broad-based community. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, before that, I remember you being with the Historical Commission.
Yes. That was the thread that came from my work life at the time. I was an employee at the National Trust for Historic Preservation as I moved to Falls Church. And so knowing, the dedication of the community to preserving its history, I got to know some of the people on the Historical Commission and was invited to become part of their board. And it was, I felt like a real student the whole time I was on the Historical Commission.
I think you were the chair, weren't you?
I was the chair, but it's easy to chair meetings and sort of spearhead some of the immediate projects that need to happen in a organization like that. But to sit around the table with people like Ross Netherton and Rick Turman, and it was a real privilege to just be inside of their knowledge, during that time. It was really fun.
I know you're being very humble, but I mean, it's very hard to get somebody who can actually bring something to completion, and I think that's why everybody's saying if you want to get something done, get Carol Jackson on there, because she knows how to get something done. Now, another organization was the Chamber of Commerce. You were on the Chamber of Commerce, isn't that correct, on the board?
Right.
Tell me about that.
That was a change of scene in my work life. I left my job at the National Trust as my oldest daughter was starting high school. I'd been a full-time working mother, wife and mother, and so I sort of had a personal wake-up call to realize that if I was ever going to be available to my children as they were teenagers, it was time to change my work pattern. So I left full-time employment and became self-employed as an insurance agent and specialized in helping provide human resource type insurance to small business owners. So the best place to ply my trade was at the Chamber of Commerce, and it just became a great community. And I really cherish I still have really good friends that are associated with the Chamber, and it was just a whole nother niche in Falls Church that I was unfamiliar with. So
I know a lot of people were sorry when you had to leave that to go on to your next phase.
Yeah.
You're really deeply involved with the athletic scene here in Falls Church too, and tell me about that.
Only as a fan.
Well, I think maybe as a fan, but I mean,
yes,
both of your daughters
as a fan. My daughters were gifted with their father's genes of being good sports performers, and they've both enjoyed women's basketball at George Mason High School. Well, actually beginning when they were 8 years old, playing through the recreation department. That whole structure has been wonderful for kids, and I feel like anything I can do to support the rec department, I owe them a lot of babysitting time and good leadership among adults. I think it's a wonderful place for our kids to be exposed to quality adults, and so I've been a big fan of sports in the city.
So we've hit on the housing, homeless issues, Chamber of Commerce for business, historical preservation, recreation, sports. What else? I mean, you've hit so many things. Have I missed something here?
No, in terms of organizations and what I would put on my volunteer resume, I think those are the highlights. I'm very proud that I was on a task force that was made up of city council members and the Historical Commission at the time that the State Theater was shut down as an active movie house in the mid-'80s. And Bob Hull and I sort of, along with many other people, but we were the head of that task force that just really kept that in the forefront of the community.
That's great.
As a building that deserved preservation and some exciting new future. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
it's neat to
it
still
is.
be here and see that the future is now for the State Theater.
That's great. Good for you.
Yeah, I was really happy about that.
Now, where are some of your favorite places to be in Falls Church?
Well, I like buying a cup of coffee from you at the farmers market on Saturdays.
7 months of the year.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my family moved from being West Enders to the East End. I don't know.
That's right.
They have in high school up at George Mason, they have the dividing line so that you're either part of the West Coast gang or the East Coast gang. And my daughter grew up on the west side of town, so she has been loyal to the West. But we moved to the Wren's townhouses a year and a half ago, and that's made me much more attentive at the farmers market, just being able to walk over there
That's
and
great.
buy my groceries on Saturday morning. So that's a great place to be. I love to be wherever people are. I think, there's no organization that attracts me unless it has, the people connections where you feel like you're accomplishing something with people who have the same interests and passions that you do. And so I'm always trying out the new restaurants in town and bringing my friends along. I have a wide circle of friends who live just outside the city, and I don't mind bragging about all the stuff that we have going on inside the community. And so I always try and bring my friends over to check out the latest
Good.
restaurant.
And we keep having them.
Yep, I was at Argia's during Christmas vacation, and
It's a great place.
so it was.
Loved it.
It's really neat just to see how the city has mushroomed that way too, to be a drawing card for people to congregate.
Well, I think, I probably get this wrong, but I think it was Margaret Mead who said, never doubt the power or the ability of a few people to change the world.
Yeah.
In fact, that's all that has ever changed is a few people. And Carol Jackson, you're one of those few people who have changed the world here in Falls Church. You continue to do it. You keep morphing into different areas. That's exciting, and I can't wait to see what you do, where you are now, and where you go next.
Well,
And
thanks,
it's
Doug.
been an honor to interview you and see another familiar face in Falls Church.
I really appreciate it. Thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
I heard music everywhere in town. A lot of folks had pianos and other instruments in their homes, and I could just walk up and down the street and hear people playing pianos and violins and singing. Some fellows were always sitting on the front steps of the stores down by the crossroads playing harmonica. Of course, there was music at church on Sundays and Wednesdays. A band always played at town picnics. One of my favorite things was dances at the Oddfellows Hall.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're in the home of Phyllis Lynn, and there really is music everywhere in Falls Church. We're lucky to be with Phyllis today. How do you do?
Delighted to have you. Hi.
We're interviewing Phyllis because she's a member of the Falls Church Music Study Club. We're going to learn more about that in our conversation. And hi.
Hi.
When did you come to Falls Church?
Well, we moved here in 1943, and we bought our house in 49, and I've lived here ever since.
Tell us about Falls Church then. Was this a newly built house at that time?
It was built in 1940.
Oh, in 40, so you weren't the first.
No, But when we moved here, there was nothing here, of course.
Right.
But we've enjoyed it. And I joined the music club in 1945.
Right.
And it started in 1905. And the original members, some of them were the Shotwells and Dr. James Brown, who was a dentist here, and his whole family belonged. And the Thompsons were an off-branch of the Browns. And they were all, and at the time I joined, Clarence Shotwell was the organist at Columbia Baptist Church. And So I knew him that way.
How many members were
Well, we
participating?
used to have maybe 30 or 35 members, but now we have 16 active members who are performers.
Right. And
And
tell us some of the instruments that other members play.
well,
Tell us
we
about.
have one of our members is Chinese, and she plays the recorders, and she teaches recorder music, and has a big group of recorder artists. And we have people who play the violin, a lot of pianists, and we have people who sing, have beautiful voices, and one of our members is in the handbell choir at Fort Myer in the chapel, and he plays. We have a sing-along at the end of the meeting, and he plays for our sing-along. And we always end up with the Little Brown Church in the Valley. That's our theme song. Our dues are very, very inexpensive. They're $5 a year. And we are always looking for members. You don't have to audition to join. We'd be delighted to have you and talk to you.
Do you have to be a musician?
No.
No.
We have people who don't do anything. They just enjoy it.
That's wonderful.
Most of them do, though. And if you'd like to have more information, you could call 532-3423.
That's wonderful. I understand you also support a scholarship fund.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, we are very active in the scholarship fund through Arlington County, through the Arlington Symphony, and the members are on the committees and very active. We think we're very proud of our scholarship contest. We feel it gives students a good chance. If they're good enough, they can perform with the symphony.
And I understand that one of the first prize is $500.
It's $500,
Right.
And second prize is $100.
So I think that's wonderful that you're able to contribute that much. Miss Lynn, Phyllis, I understand you're willing to play for us today.
Yes, I enjoy it. My organ is a church organ. It's a Rogers organ with a full pedal board and 2 manuals, and I enjoy the Rogers very much.
What selection will you play for us?
I'm going to play. It's variations on a theme by Haydn, and it's adapted by Brahms.
Okay.
Okay.
Sometimes I would walk to and from the village along the roads, but I loved to walk the trails and alleys behind houses, through fields and woods. It just seemed more special.
Many of the trails, old historic trails of Falls Church, are still around in a little different form than they were when Elizabeth Stiles used to walk through here, through the meadows and the fields. Let's take a walk through a second trail in Cavalier Trail Park, one of the original trails that went through here. We're going to walk through the parking lot. Why don't you come along with me? On your right as you enter the parking lot is a native plant butterfly garden. These are many of the plants that the people of the past would have seen as they're walking through the meadows. And every week you pass by here, different flowers are in bloom. And it's a continually changing rainbow of colors from April until September. And it's even interesting in the winter. We walk through the parking lot over toward the trail, beginning of the trail by the basketball court. You notice on the left there's a deeply recessed stream. And that area had been dug out many years ago and cemented for Trips Run to prevent flooding. And it was always mowed completely clean. What we've been doing in the last few years is allowing this to become a no-mow zone and to create a wildlife preserve in here. And it results in cleaner water and more birds and butterflies in the area. And it's very exciting to see all the changes throughout the year again in the flowers and the berries and the birds and the butterflies. In 1992, 120 people came out here and planted 65 trees. This area was essentially simply grass and concrete. And now, less than a decade later, we're looking like a real park with many trees that are becoming of healthy, mature size, from yellow woods to loblolly pines, willow oaks, sweet gum, pussy willow, tupelo. A lot of river birch is coming up. On the left you see the chicory blooming. It's not a native plant, but it was really important in the history of our country. In the Civil War, the soldiers used to make coffee out of portions of the chicory plant. On the right is our a basketball court, and most evenings and throughout the weekend that court is filled with people, as is the tennis court. As we walk past the tennis court, on your left we have our specimen river birch of the city. And when we planted trees, we decided to plant a whole bunch of river birch near that to match those. So they'll be forming a canopy over the stream. So these river birches in front of us will eventually catch up to the specimen tree and match it over the stream. At the end of the tennis court, there's an interesting hedge of sweet spire, one of the most beautiful flowering trees in May and shrubs in May you'll ever find. And what happened here was that the area was flooding and causing the tennis court to crack. And it was about to be paved over, and it was suggested that instead of paving it, that a lot of mulch be put in, a lot of good soil, and plant some shrubs that have some that really suck the water out of the ground quickly and transpire it into the air. And sweet spire was chosen, and it's worked beautifully. This area no longer floods. So it's a wonderful flood control technique, is instead of paving it, is to plant special plants in special soil. And the flooding goes away. You can use that on your property. This young river birch in front of us was also planted in 1992, and every one of these trees along here that are about this age were planted by citizens of Falls Church. Everyone has a story behind it. They were not easy to plant in this hard-packed clay soil, and we had to replace some of it, and a lot of work was involved. I think this one was planted by Kurt and Janice Nettie. They're native to Virginia, and they have the beautiful thin papery bark. They generally grow along rivers and streams, as you would suspect. They generally tend to lean over the streams. Okay, passing by the little yellow woods here that we planted in 1992. And we have this 20-year-old sycamore tree here. It was planted by the city arborist. So a few years ago we planted another sycamore across the stream so they'll match each other. And every good trail has curves in it. Makes it more mysterious. As you go around toward the curve, you wonder what's on the other side. And Cavalier Trail is no different. Here we go around the trail and right around the Tupelo. Every tree in Cavalier Trail Park has a story behind it. And this tree was planted in 1992 during the planting party by John Meyer and Janet Gores. John Meyer is currently president of the Falls Church Village Preservation and Improvement Society, and Janet Gores is on the Tree Commission for Falls Church City. And this was another difficult tree to plant because of the soil they had to plant it in. And as it grows taller and taller, it becomes very impressive, especially in the fall when you see the beautiful scarlet red colors. Or in September when you see the beautiful purple berries that the birds eat. And as we walk toward the bridge, crossing Trips Run, we pass by the loblolly pines on the left that were planted by a Boy Scout troop during our planting party. They were very small trees then, but they're starting to now take some shape. This bridge that was been the subject of many award-winning photographs in Falls Church calendars. Generally, these photographs are taken in the winter before after a snowfall, before first people have a chance to walk over it. Beautiful with the Chinese elm growing over it like this. And the curve. Why, here's a friendly cat coming to greet me. Meet the friendliest cats in Cavalier Trail Park.
One of the most interesting things to me is that right in the middle of Falls Church, right in the middle of one of the fastest urbanizing areas anywhere, we have magnificent old houses and trees, beautiful music still in homes and on the streets, marvelous places to gather, and trails to return home on. It makes me wonder why these wonderful qualities of village life remain here in Falls Church.